Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton squares off with the House Benghazi committee tomorrow. The Democrats on the panel are so disgruntled with the direction of the investigation, they say they may resign from the committee. Joining us now is a Democratic member of that Benghazi committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us this morning. Are you really considering resigning from the committee?
Well, I think we're going to have to consider what the Republicans intend to do with the committee going forward. As you may know, they plan to call 12 witnesses this year, including the Defense Secretary, the head of the CIA, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They canceled all those other hearings. The only hearing they had any interest in was a hearing with Secretary Clinton, and we know from Representative McCarthy and Representative Hanna just why that's the case. So where are they going to go from here? And I think, once they figure out what they want to do with this committee, going to have to ask a hard question. Are we justified in continuing to lend credibility to a committee that largely has none? And here's the dilemma. Without us on the committee, without us in the room, for example, it's very hard for us to point out the misleading attacks, the misleading character of the attacks they've been making. And I'll give you a concrete and recent example. Chairman Gowdy, just as recently as last week, released a 13-page letter largely attacking Secretary Clinton, accusing her of leaking, or actually not leaking, but having an email containing a classified CIA source, putting American lives at risk, the chairman said so breathlessly in that letter. And then what do we learn when we inquire of the CIA? Nothing in that email was classified, and nor was the name of this person. It was merely being protected out of their privacy interests.
Yeah, but Congressman, I mean, Republicans have a different story about all this. They say there is still so much to be learned. Just last night, Speaker John Boehner said that they have basically been stonewalled by Hillary Clinton, by the State Department. He said that just yesterday, for the first time, did they receive Ambassador Chris Stevens' emails. Listen to what John Boehner said last night.
Today, the State Department turned over 1,300 pages of printed documents from Ambassador Stevens' emails. Today. They've been stonewalling us now for 3 years on giving us the documents that we need in order to get the truth out there.
Congressman, what's your response to that?
Well, like many of the comments in this investigation, I think very misleading. What the Speaker did not tell you, what he did not say in those remarks, is that we have already received a large number of Ambassador Stevens' emails. Indeed, the Committee on Government Reform received them years ago, or at least a year or two ago, and we received those emails from the Committee on Government Reform. So much of the content that our chairman was describing from those emails over the weekend were emails we already had.
But how can you know that? I mean, if you're just now reading 1,300 of Ambassador Stevens' emails, how can you know what you don't know? You don't know what content is in them if you're just reading them.
Well, this is precisely the point. You don't go out, as the Speaker did and as the chairman did, if you're running a legitimate investigation, and say, we have discovered new emails that shed new light, when the fact of the matter is, if you go through them and compare them to what you already had, you may find that these newly released emails don't tell any different story than the ones you already had. In fact, many of them may be precise duplicates of the emails you've already had. That's been the pattern here. There's a claim made by the Speaker, by the chairman, and then a few days later, when the dust settles, after they've gotten a headline in the newspaper, it's revealed actually these emails they're referring to, they largely already had. So we're going to have to wait a few more days until we can figure out, is this really something new? Do these emails tell us anything we don't already know? Are these emails we largely already had? Because frankly, if you look at the claim they made last week about the CIA source, that proved not to be true either.
Yeah, but Congressman, isn't the bottom line here, have you learned all there is to know about Benghazi?
You know, look, we will never learn everything there is to know about any particular incident in our history. But I can tell you this, after 17 months, after $4.5 million, we haven't learned anything new that contradicts the core conclusions of the 8 other investigations that went on before. Yes, you can always find new facts in the interstices of things you knew already. But in terms of whether anything alters your understanding of the events, we have discovered nothing new to contribute, nothing new to tell the families, and nothing new to tell the American people.
Okay, so if the conclusions have already been reached, who was to blame for what happened in Benghazi?
Well, you know, in the first instance, the terrorists who attacked us were to blame.
But beyond that, I mean, what else could the U.S. have done to prevent
Beyond that, as we knew a year and a half ago, when the Accountability Review Board finished its work product, the State Department made serious mistakes in terms of security in Benghazi, and there are people they identified in the that were responsible for those lapses in security. So those conclusions have already been made, and frankly, nothing we've discovered in the last 17 months tells us that the responsibility lies anywhere else. But nonetheless, this investigation churns on, and why? As Representative McCarthy told us, because the goal is not really to learn something new about Benghazi at this point. The goal has been really only to see if they can damage the Democratic candidate for president.
With all the information that you have, should Secretary Clinton have done something different to protect Ambassador Stevens?
You know, what the Accountability Review Board found, and I think what is still the case after our investigation, is there were people high up in the State Department whose responsibility it was to respond to the ambassador's request for additional security. They didn't.
Including Hillary Clinton.
That was a serious mistake. Those requests didn't rise to the Secretary's attention. And frankly, I think there's a serious policy question about whether you want the Secretary of State involved in the micromanagement of security at each and every diplomatic facility around the world. It's a big job as Secretary of State that involves more than the security of particular facilities. But the Accountability Review Board did make recommendations about how to make sure that those requests reached the highest levels, the necessary levels, and how there was better management in the future. And one of the things I think will be interesting to ask the Secretary tomorrow is, how are those recommendations being implemented? How should the department be restructured to make sure that those requests are acted upon? Those are legitimate questions, but by and large, those have not been the questions this committee has been asking.
We will be looking for those answers tomorrow. Congressman Adam Schiff, thanks so much for being on New Day.
You bet. Thank you.
Let's get over to Michaela.